My father mocked my Purple Heart in front of the whole ceremony. I stayed silent. Then the general opened a sealed folder and the entire room turned toward my family. The room went completely still when my father sneered from the third row. They gave it to her for bleeding, not bravery. The general's hand was inches from my chest, the Purple Heart resting between his fingers ready to be pinned to my uniform. I had survived Kandahar with shrapnel buried near my skull, with headaches that split my nights open, and memories that came back in flashes I could not always control. But nothing from the ambush cut as deep as my father's voice in that room. Then the general lowered his hand, reached inside his jacket, and pulled out a sealed manila folder. His expression changed so sharply that even the people who had been whispering stopped breathing. When he began to speak, his voice was cold enough to make the ceremony feel less like an honor and more like a reckoning. What he revealed about my own family made the ambush itself look almost merciful. But my story did not begin with betrayal. It began with responsibility. I was 12 the first time I paid the water bill without telling anyone. Dad had been drinking again, and Mom was too exhausted from cleaning houses to notice the red slip taped to the front door. I found it before anyone else did. I pulled it down, folded it small enough to fit in my pocket, and pretended nothing was wrong. That afternoon, I rode my bike 5 miles to the payment drop box. I used the babysitting money I had been saving for a pair of cleats I already knew I would probably never buy. When I came home, nobody noticed the bill was gone. Nobody asked where my money had gone. The water stayed on, and that was enough. That became the rhythm of my life. Quiet fixes, invisible effort. Holding things together before they cracked wide open. Dad used to say I was the strong one. Built different, he would mutter, when I helped him change the oil, carried boxes he said were too heavy for Leah, or stood between Kyle and whatever trouble he had dragged home that week. Back then, I thought it meant he saw me. I thought it meant he was proud. But when I enlisted at 17, that pride turned sour. "Oh, so now you think you're better than all of us?" he barked, slamming his coffee mug down so hard coffee splashed across the table. There was no family business for me to abandon. There was no legacy waiting for me at home. There were only odd jobs Dad picked up whenever someone in town had not yet heard about his temper. Still, he acted like I had betrayed some great Quinn family tradition by choosing a uniform instead of staying trapped inside the same old mess. Mom cried, but not for the reason I wanted her to. She told me she just wanted me to be safe. I believed her for about 2 weeks. Then she asked if I could start sending money home. "Only until Kyle gets back on his feet," she said. Kyle never found his feet. Or if he did, he used them to run from bills, jobs, and accountability. He crashed on friends' couches, racked up speeding tickets, quit work after work, and called me from burner numbers whenever he needed rescuing. He always used the same voice he had used when we were kids and he had broken the window. "Harper, don't be mad, but..." Leah was subtler. She never demanded anything directly. She framed every request as if helping her was proof that I was a good person. "You'd want your niece to have a good Christmas, right? You don't want me to drop out, do you? You know Emma looks up to you." I paid Leah's tuition more than once. She thanked me once. Over the years, the requests piled up. Rent, car repairs, emergency vet bills, Kyle's overdue phone bills, Leah's school fees, bail money that was always described as a misunderstanding. I sent what I could even when I was stationed overseas. Sometimes I would be crouched in a sand-blasted tent, headaches pulsing behind my eyes, trying to wire money home while mortar rounds cracked somewhere in the distance. My hands would smell like dust metal and gun oil, and I would still be listening to my family argue over how quickly I could send another transfer. They never asked how I was. They never asked if I was sleeping. They never asked what I had seen, what I had carried, or who I had lost. They only asked how fast I could help. I told myself that was love. I convinced myself that if I gave enough, did enough, stayed useful enough, one day they would finally see my worth. But every time I came home, it was the same. Dad scoffed at my uniform. Kyle made soldier jokes. Leah texted under the table during dinner. Mom served meals like peace offerings while refusing to meet my eyes. Still, I kept showing up. Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays. I came home in full dress blues more than once, hoping someone would ask about my deployments, my squad, the lives we had saved, or the ones we had not been able to save. They never did. There was a photograph on the mantel of me at 14, holding a spelling bee trophy. The frame had been cracked for years, and always sat slightly crooked. I used to think no one had noticed. After everything happened, I understood the truth. They had noticed. They just did not care enough to fix it. The Purple Heart ceremony was supposed to be the moment everything changed. I had imagined it dozens of times in my head. My family rising to their feet, Mom crying for the right reason, Leah finally looking up from her phone, Kyle, for once, not making a joke, Dad clapping the loudest, his face softened by the realization that the daughter he had dismissed had carried more weight than he ever understood. That fantasy kept me alive on nights when the headaches were too sharp to sleep and the memories came back in jagged flashes. It kept me going when I woke up reaching for a weapon that was not beside me anymore. It kept me going when doctors spoke gently and used words like trauma recovery and long-term damage. Instead, my family showed up late. They shuffled into the third row while the ceremony was already underway, moving with the irritated stiffness of people who believed they had been inconvenienced. Dad sat with his arms crossed, jaw clenched, looking as if he were enduring a dental appointment. Kyle leaned over now and then to whisper something, smirking, like he was in on some private joke. Leah's thumb never left her phone screen. Mom tried. I will give her that. She wore a forced smile and clutched her purse to her chest so tightly her knuckles went pale. But even that told the truth. She was not proud. She was bracing for impact. Around me, officers stood tall beneath the stage lights. Their medals caught the glow as names were called and service records were read aloud. Each sentence carried sacrifice. Each ribbon represented fire, fear, discipline, and loss. And still, from the third row, I felt the cold coming off my own bloodline. The one row in the room that would not look me in the eye. Then my name was called. Sergeant Harper Quinn. I stepped forward with my knees steady and my back straight. My uniform fit like a second skin, crisp, precise, and heavier than fabric should ever feel. The applause that followed was warm and respectful, but I barely heard it over the rush of blood in my ears. I found the general's eyes. He gave me one small nod. Then he reached for the medal. That was when my father's voice cracked through the room. They gave it to her for bleeding, not bravery. The sentence hit harder than the blast in Kandahar. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. Someone gasped. A few people murmured under their breath. I heard one voice whisper, "Jesus Christ," but I did not move. My body locked. I did not blink. I stood there with the ribbon brushing my collarbone, drowning inside my own uniform. The general did not move either. His hand froze in midair, the pin hovering just short of the fabric. His eyes shifted from me to the third row, then landed on my father. For one long second, the room held its breath. Then something changed. The general lowered the medal. Slowly, deliberately, he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a sealed manila folder. It was stamped, marked, and official in a way that made my stomach turn cold. This was not part of the ceremony. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice dropping into something colder and heavier. "We are here today to honor Sergeant Harper Quinn for her bravery in Kandahar. But there is more to her story, and you deserve to know it." He opened the folder. I could barely breathe. "The ambush that wounded Sergeant Quinn was not random," he continued. "Our investigation has concluded that intelligence about her unit's movement was leaked and compromised from within." The crowd went still. Even Leah looked up from her phone. The general's gaze hardened. The source, he said, was her own family. For a moment I did not understand the words. I heard them, but my mind refused to let them land. My family. The people I had paid for, covered for, defended, saved. The people I had kept choosing even when they made me feel invisible. The general continued, but the room had already tilted beneath me. There were mentions of transfers, false research channels, compromised information, and an investigation that had followed the money backward until it reached a shared Quinn family account. I did not look at them. I could not. After the ceremony, I did not go to the reception. I did not speak to the press. I did not wait for apologies, explanations, or denials. I walked straight past the rows of stunned faces, down the hallway, through the doors, and into the parking lot. My hands shook so badly I could not get my car key in on the first try. For the next 2 days, I turned my phone off. Not silent, off. No missed calls, no texts, no messages pretending confusion, no apologies that were really demands for comfort. Then I walked into the investigator's office and said 5 words I never thought I would say. I'm ready to give a statement. From that point on, I stopped surviving quietly. I started paying attention. The OSI team did not hold back. They showed me the breakdown. Wire transfers from Meridian Research to a shared Quinn family account. Regular amounts, increasing amounts. Deposits that lined up too neatly with sensitive events to be coincidence. Unit deployment, patrol rotation, vehicle changes. The week we switched routes. The week we shifted our timing. The week we moved assets through an area that should not have been known outside the chain of command. I remembered every one of those changes. I remembered every risk assessment, every tense briefing, every time I had looked at my squad and believed we had done everything we could to keep ourselves alive. And now I knew that every time I thought I was protecting them, someone back home had already sold us out. I did not confront my family. Not yet. Instead, I changed my bank account. I canceled the automatic payments I had set up to cover Leah's school fees and Kyle's overdue phone bills. I gave notice on the storage unit back home I had been paying for because their furniture was supposedly only there temporarily. I moved everything I could into tighter control. My communications, my passwords, my mail, my emergency contacts, my finances, my access points. And I started therapy. The first session, I said nothing for 10 minutes. I just sat there, staring at the carpet, my hands folded so tightly my fingers hurt. Finally, I asked the question that had been eating through me. Is it still betrayal if they didn't mean to hurt me? The therapist looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Did you bleed less because they didn't mean to?" That broke something open. After that, I began documenting everything. Conversations I remembered, odd questions they had asked, times Kyle had pushed for details he should not have cared about, times Leah had asked where I was going to be when I would be unreachable, whether I was with the same unit or moving somewhere new. Times Mom had acted like she was only trying to plan around me. I pulled old voicemails. I searched email threads I had ignored. I wrote down timelines that now made sense in ways I wished they did not. It had all been there, hiding in plain sight. A month passed, then 2. One morning, Leah texted me, "Rent's due, can you cover it?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed one word, no. No explanation, no apology, no softening, just no. 3 minutes later, Kyle called. I sent it straight to voicemail. Then came the group chat message from Mom. "Harper, we don't know what they're saying, but we're still your family." I did not answer. Instead, I printed the message, highlighted the word still, and filed it with the rest of my documents. Still your family. As if that title erased the blood on their hands. I was not out for revenge. I was not planning to ruin them. That had never been the goal. What I wanted was silence, freedom, air. So I took it the only way I knew how. I stopped explaining. I stopped rescuing. I stopped answering. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I began to breathe again. The silence did not go unnoticed. When my family realized I was not coming back with money explanations, forgiveness, or emotional cleanup, they turned up the volume. Mom started with guilt. Powder blue envelopes arrived weekly, her handwriting careful and familiar, her words heavy with selective memory. "We never meant to hurt you, Harper. Families make mistakes, but this silence is killing us." She never mentioned the money. She never mentioned Meridian research. She never mentioned the soldiers who never made it home. She never mentioned the folder, the ceremony, or the fact that my blood had soaked into the dirt because people with my last name had chosen greed over loyalty. Only her pain mattered in those letters. Kyle tried charm. One evening he showed up outside my building, leaning against the hood of a borrowed car, like nothing had happened. He lifted one hand when he saw me. "Come on, sis. Let's grab dinner. Clear the air." I did not answer. I walked past him and headed for the entrance. He followed me halfway to the door before raising his voice loud enough for strangers to hear. "You think you're better than us now. All that uniform did was turn you cold." The old reflex flared inside me, the one that wanted to explain, to soothe, to make him understand, to prove I was not cruel. I strangled it with silence and kept walking. Leah went louder. She posted a long message online vague enough to avoid legal trouble, but pointed enough to cause damage. "Some people think war gives them the right to abandon their own blood. Just because you wear a medal doesn't mean you didn't destroy your family." The likes rolled in. Then the comments. People I had not seen since high school tagged me, asking what was going on. Others posted heart emojis and called Leah strong. Some said family should always come first. I did not respond. I saved screenshots. The Whisper campaign moved offline too. Old neighbors approached me at the grocery store with soft voices and concerned eyes. "Your mom's been so sad lately. Your dad hasn't left the house in days. They miss you." Church acquaintances sent messages late at night. "Can't you just talk to them? Your father is heartbroken. Life is too short for grudges." They were not malicious. Most of them probably believed they were helping. But they were pawns, and my family had always been good at turning other people into instruments. Talking had become a weapon. I was not stepping back onto that battlefield. The real breaking point came 3 months after the ceremony. I received a letter from a distant cousin, a woman I barely knew, inviting me to Thanksgiving. She wrote about healing, forgiveness, and how the family needed someone to bring everyone together again. One sentence sat in the middle of the page like a command. "We need you, Harper. You're the leader who can heal us." The word leader was underlined twice, as if this were a campaign, as if I had earned rank in the army just so they could use it against me at home. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the letter in one hand and my purple heart in the other. One was official heavy and earned in blood. The other was paper ink and manipulation dressed up as reunion. They did not want me home. They wanted me useful. I burned the letter in the sink. I watched the edges blacken and curl. I watched the underlined word leader turn to ash. They tried everything after that: guilt, shame, nostalgia, smear tactics, sympathy campaigns, sudden concern, old photographs, messages about Dad's health, messages about Mom's tears, messages about family history they had never respected when I was the one keeping the family standing. Kyle tried cornering me outside my apartment one night. His words were slurred, his smile sour. He told me I was selfish. He said that without me, the family was falling apart. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because for the first time, he had accidentally told the truth. Without me, the family was falling apart. because I had been the support beam all along. Leah weaponized Emma. She showed up once with her daughter and stood near the sidewalk, waiting until I came outside. Emma was younger then, still a child looking confused and uncomfortable, while Leah held her shoulders like a prop. "She misses her aunt," Leah said. "Don't punish a child." I looked at Emma and my heart twisted. None of this was her fault. She was innocent. But Leah knew exactly what she was doing. I walked away before my face could betray me. Mom left voicemails about Dad's declining health. Her voice broke in all the right places. She described sleepless nights, doctor appointments, loneliness, regret. But even then, she never said the one thing that mattered. She never said what we did to you was wrong. Every angle was tested, every tactic sharpened. But something had changed in me. I no longer flinched when they cried. I no longer explained when they accused me. I no longer mistook persistence for love. The truth was brutal, but it was also liberating. They were not fighting for me. They were fighting for access. Access to my money, my time, my silence. My willingness to absorb the consequences of their choices. For the first time in my life, I did not give it to them. 5 years later, I stood in the same hall where everything had shattered. The polished wood was the same. The echo of footsteps was the same. The quiet anticipation in the room was the same. For a moment, it all came back like a ghost replaying the worst scene of my life. But this time, I was not there to receive a medal. I was there to give a lecture. Captain Harper Quinn, assigned to train younger officers on operational security. My story had become a case study. I stood at the front of the room and told them what no one ever wants to believe. Sometimes the threat does not wear a uniform. Sometimes it shares your last name. The room went still. The young faces in front of me looked fresh, focused, and faintly disbelieving. I remembered being that age. I remembered thinking blood meant safety. I remembered thinking family was the one place betrayal could not reach. I watched realization ripple through them, and I understood that my scars were no longer only mine. They had become a warning. After the lecture, a young sergeant pulled me aside. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "Ma'am, my mom keeps asking for my deployment schedule. She says it's to plan visits, but she wants times, names, unit details. It feels wrong." Her voice cracked on the last word. I did not dismiss her. I did not tell her she was being paranoid. I did not offer the easy comfort people always offer when they want the world to be simpler than it is. "Trust your instincts," I told her. "Document everything. Silence buys you time. Time buys you safety." 6 months later, that sergeant's documentation exposed another family-based leak. Foreign operatives again. The same strategy. The same lies dressed up as research. The same use of guilt, closeness, and family obligation to make sensitive information feel harmless. But this time it stopped before blood was spilled. That night I sat alone at my desk, staring at my Purple Heart. For years, the metal had felt poisoned. Proof of survival, yes, but also proof of betrayal carved into bronze. I could not look at it without seeing the ceremony, my father's sneer, the general's folder, and the terrible silence that followed. Now, it carried a different weight. Not just pain, not just survival. Legacy. Then came the knock. I was not expecting visitors. I crossed the room quietly and looked through the peephole. A teenage girl stood outside my door with dark hair, a backpack slung over one shoulder, and my father's stubborn jaw. Emma, Leah's daughter. She was 17 now. Not the confused child Leah had once used as a weapon, but almost grown, standing alone with sharp eyes and a purpose that made my pulse slow. I opened the door but kept the chain latched. "Aunt Harper," she said carefully. "I know I'm not supposed to be here. Mom doesn't know. But I need the truth." Her words cut sharper than any accusation. I studied her through the narrow opening. Same bloodline, different fire. "How did you find me, Google?" she said. Then she swallowed. "Military announcements, articles, your lectures. I've been following your career since I was old enough to use a computer." I said nothing. She shifted the backpack strap higher on her shoulder. "I found old bank statements, deposits from something called Meridian Research. The dates match your deployments. Mom always said you abandoned us, but I don't believe her anymore." My chest tightened. For years, Emma had been the pawn. The child used to guilt me back into compliance. The niece whose name Leah dropped whenever she needed money forgiveness or leverage. And now here she was seeking answers on her own. "Why does it matter to you?" I asked. Emma's jaw trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. "Because I'm about to turn 18. Because I need to know what kind of family I come from before I decide who I want to be." So I let her in. I did not tell her every classified detail. I could not. But I told her enough. The ambush, the investigation, the folder, the money, the accounts, the way questions that had seemed harmless suddenly made sense, the way my family had taken my trust and turned it into someone else's access point. She sat in silence while I spoke, her face growing paler with every sentence. Her knuckles went white around the straps of her backpack. When I finished, she whispered, "They said you were cold. They said you destroyed the family." Her voice shook. "But you were the one they destroyed." I nodded once. There was nothing else to say. Emma's eyes burned with something fierce. "I don't want to be like them," she said. "I want to be better. I want to serve, not for penance, for myself. So one day someone can say I did something that mattered." For the first time in years, when I looked at someone connected to my family, I felt something other than grief. I felt possibility. "Write to me," I said finally. "I can't promise I'll always answer, but I'll always read." She smiled. It was small and shaky, but real. And in that moment, I saw the echo I had never expected. Not a repetition of betrayal, but a chance to break the cycle. The Purple Heart still sits on my desk. For years it felt like a shackle, reminding me not only of Kandahar, but of the people who had sold me out to my enemies. Now it means something different. It is proof that I survived both kinds of battle, the one fought with bullets and the one fought with blood ties. Cutting my family off was not the hardest part. The hardest part was rebuilding something in the empty space they left behind. I had to learn that boundaries are not cruelty. I had to learn that loyalty without respect is not love. I had to learn that survival sometimes means choosing yourself, even when the world calls you selfish for doing it. The family I lost has been replaced by one I chose. Brothers and sisters in uniform. Friends who understand that trust is earned, not inherited. Commanders who see me not as a paycheck, not as a lifeline, not as someone useful, but as a soldier and a leader. These people show up not because they have to, but because they want to. That is the difference. Emma's visit gave me hope I had not expected. It reminded me that cycles can break. It reminded me that truth, once spoken, has a way of taking root, even in hostile soil. When her first letter arrived, written on lined paper and folded twice, I sat with it for a long time before opening it. Her handwriting was steady. She was not asking for money. She was not asking for favors. She was not asking me to forgive anyone or come back to the family. She was only telling me she had gotten into college. She said she was working towards something real, something earned. I keep that letter tucked beside the medal. One is a symbol of pain endured. The other is a symbol of possibility ahead. Dad once told me soldiers sign up to die. He was wrong. Soldiers sign up to serve, to protect, to fight for a country, for values, and for each other. What I did not understand until much later was that sometimes you also have to fight for yourself. I have survived war. I have survived betrayal. And now I live by a simple truth. The strongest families are not always the ones you are born into. They're the ones you build through trust, through loyalty, and through choice. And that choice is mine. Always mine. Have you ever been dismissed or betrayed at the very moment you should have been celebrated? Where do you draw the line between forgiveness and self-protection? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if this story resonated with you, tap like so it can reach someone else who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more true stories about boundaries, resilience, and rebuilding after betrayal.